You guys all set? We'll call the Regional Finance Subcommittee to order. Quick roll call. Derek Gracia.
Here.
Rachel Camera.
Here.
Charlie Sullivan is not here. Katie.
Here.
Darren Beal.
Here.
Also present is the Lakeville Town Administrator, as well as other representatives from the school committee here. We have LakeCAM recording the meeting. Anyone else recording the meeting? First order of business is acceptance of minutes, which we do not have, so I apologize for that. We'll put that on for the next agenda. We'll go to 3A, which is an update on the FY20 budget.
In your packet, I just gave you an update of revenue and expenditures. This is the same information I give to the school committee when we meet. We're on target for FY20. As we go through the winter, I monitor overtime and utility spends, and right now we're on track. Also in your packet is the FY20 assessment sheet, and there have been, sorry, it might be the third one, there have been no changes to date.
Any questions on FY20?
Just like the assessment sheet font to be up a few points.
Sorry. I try to keep it one page instead of multiple.
I'm just giving you grief, Ashley.
And we still await potential regional transportation.
And circuit breaker.
For the supplement. Seeing no questions on the FY20 budget, move on to 3A, update on the RFQ for performance contracting.
Last Wednesday, we received 4 responses to our RFQ for performance contracting. Since then, we went over all of the binders for the vendors and reviewed their qualifications. As of Tuesday, we made a decision and we're going to move forward with Train to do performance contracting. We will be entering into doing the investment grade energy audit, and that will be coming up in the next week or two. After that, we will decide if we're going to move forward with the projects. If we will, we'll be looking for funding and hopefully a start date as of July 1st for replacement of the high school boilers.
Any questions?
4 decent packets of information. Greg Goodwin, our Director of Facilities, worked with Ashley, along with Nate Darling. Spent a significant amount of time reviewing.
Yeah, what are you doing making them work on Sundays?
I know. We were all here.
Sunday, kind of take a look at those this past Sunday. So we appreciate all the time they spent. They included me in the process from an education perspective. Actually, I was impressed with the other clients as well. Train had some experience, and we certainly thought clearly they were the top, but other choices made it. It was nice to see some of the other work that had been done, but feel real good about kind of where we're at in relation to that, especially from a time frame perspective.
And just as a reminder and just a clarification, the audit is about a 40 to 45K cost
It is.
that we will be responsible if we do not move forward with the project, correct?
Correct.
Okay. Any questions on the RFQ for the performance contracting? Seeing none, the main reason why everyone's here tonight is the FY21 budget presentation. So last Wednesday at the full school committee meeting, the full school committee has received their binders for that. A lot of great detail, and the representatives from the towns have also received that. We have outlined a process at the school committee that we will be reviewing each of these sections over the next 2 school committee meetings in great detail with the respective department heads as well as the administration for that. And then we will follow the budget timeline for, I believe, the first meeting in April is when we have the full public presentation for the budget itself. I'd like, Rick, if you can spend a few minutes just to maybe give the Cliff Notes version of this, and then we can sort of give our initial feedback from the school committee perspective between Derek and I, and then we can open up for a full discussion with the rest of the...
So some of you commented, and I appreciate your comments. I think, my Director of Finance, Ashley, did a phenomenal job. It's a pretty transparent, pretty user-friendly guide, right? And I think it kickstarts, and I mean it sincerely, it starts the budget process. there's no expectation from my perspective. I've been superintendent for 16 years that the number is the number. In fact, I don't think I've ever experienced that where the starting number ended up being the exact number. So we clearly recognize adjustments need to be made in line with capacity for towns and so forth. Keep in mind that the school board hasn't met in its entirety. That our next meeting will be a pretty roll up the sleeves type of meeting. We have all the principals. So the next school committee meeting, which is February 26th, which is right around the corner, will be an engaged meeting where all the directors and principals will be present to answer specific questions that committee members have as it relates to that. And I think the focus, as Steve said, would be with the schools, but also obviously some district-wide oversight. So you'll have the director of technology, you'll have the director of student services, professional development, director of curriculum, but the principals there. At this time, that meeting, just so this group knows, anyone who's planning to attend, is going to be at the middle school. And in all likelihood, it's probably going to be in the auditorium at the middle school. We've had it in the library in the past.
Yeah.
Sounds like a great piece, but it's a little challenging in there when you move things around. So that was a conversation I just had with the principal today. He was looking at the cafeteria potentially, but we have our after-school program and parents and kids, so the possibility. But it will definitely be at the middle school, and certainly principals will be prepared to answer questions as it relates. So that's kind of the short version and the expectation. Obviously, I've had some individual conversations with some of you relative to what the towns are able to take, and actually some school committee members have already reached out to me to make sure that I have prepared my principals and directors for specific questions as it relates to staffing, supplies, textbooks. A couple of things to keep in mind that I shared with the committee, the school committee, and some of you that maybe were present the other night that we're still waiting on. We're still waiting on our health insurance negotiations, so we're still cautiously optimistic in relation to maybe still being able to make some adjustments, even though we've built a placeholder into that. We're still waiting on regional transportation supplemental monies, which we could carry over into FY21, and obviously any state numbers as it relates to circuit breaker and other things, although in Chapter 70, as Ashley kind of has commented publicly, there typically isn't going to be a whole lot of swing there, right? We get $30 more per student. Like a lot of districts, a lot of the large chunk of money, I use that term real loosely, that went to a small percentage of communities. We actually have a decrease from our state aid, right, when you back out the regional transportation. So I'd be happy to answer any specific questions. The school committee did not ask questions, as has been the process in the first presentation. It's the superintendent's budget, and I make it clear that that's the case. So towns don't get misled to think, really, were you thinking this is the number we're ultimately going to come to as it relates to assessment? No, I think the committee has already made it clear that they're going to have some engaged conversations, and we've also accelerated that budget schedule based on the direction of this group to be sure it meets a timeline that I think we can all be on the same page as we roll into town meetings. That was a long-winded way, Steve. That was kind of my Cliff Notes version of it. But I'd be happy to answer specific questions, and certainly Ashley can speak to any details. But I thought, really the idea, if the towns already have established some parameters, it would be helpful for the school committee beginning as early as our next meeting to know what that is kind of moving forward, and we can keep that in mind as we look.
I do think, and Derek, please chime in from a school committee perspective, there is definitely some conversation pieces that we've highlighted as far as what is in here, as well as things that are not in here, right? So also within this binder are things that were requested that were by the administration, not funded in that aspect of it. So those are questions that we have in there. There are certainly questions that, for example, right now the regional transportation is about 135K less. Do we think that that's where it's going to end up being? No, and every year that has proved that it's been much higher than what that is there. So that's always a moving target in that particular piece. And that's always a trouble spot, and it seems to be when we get further closer to town meeting, we sort of get a more number that can be baked in that case. So definitely those are pieces in there. Special education is a big topic area as far as the resources around that. And so those are going to be real conversations that we're going to have in play, both around personnel in place as well as resources that are outside of that. So some questions we've already turned over, but Derek, let me know if I'm missing anything there, and then we'll open it up to others that have some initial questions.
I have questions and comment on a couple of things. 2 items. One, the vote from the school committee's perspective. What date? I talked at the last meeting of pushing that before the April date because of the fact that we have elections. And I don't think it's fair to ask a new member to try to vote on a school budget that they haven't had any input into. So I don't think we've ever resolved that, the school committee, from the school committee perspective, and I think we should address that. And that should be something all going forward for good. I don't see it makes any sense to have new school committee members vote on a $40 million budget 1 day or 2 days after they've been elected. So that would be one item. The second item that I'd like to address is a couple of policy items, not policy items, but procedural items that this committee has tackled with, and we have a lot of different, not a lot, but quite a few different members here that haven't had the opportunity to discuss things like what do we feel about capital items and how do we fund them because they're in this operating budget. How do we handle school choice because we discussed that, how we should handle that in this, around this table. So those are a couple items in this budget that I'd like to get the feeling of this committee of how we handle, because certainly how those are handled will determine some numbers in this budget. The total may be the same, but how they get handled may be differently. For instance, in the past, this committee has always said, hey, based on past practice, probably not the best idea to be putting capital items in our operating budget, and how we go about handling the operating budget. We always talked about peeling those out and making those a separate warrant article. I believe those were discussions that we've had. So that's not the case in this budget, particularly when it comes to technology. So how do we want to handle that? I mean, I think that's a big number in here right now that I'd like to know how this committee wants to recommend the school committee handle that, if they have a recommendation.
Steve, and you're jotting down some of the dates, Derek. To Derek's point, just so town members know, for example, so we have built into the operational budget about $200,000 for the infrastructure of the wireless upgrade for the schools. That has historically been a capital and has been separated out. Does that actually jump in if the numbers?
It's 80,000 is in there. It's not the full 200,000 in the operating.
Because of what's in place.
Because of the reimbursement.
The total increase for the technology?
Is about 100 and
176.
170, yeah.
And I think that's part of one conversation as far as breaking out that number
100%.
into, it's not part of the operating, but it's a separate.
You have 80,000 in the operating budget
Yes.
for that, and
But that, so just to be clear, that is the end result after rebate.
Right, so.
Okay, so do you want to clarify?
Sure, so the capital, if we go for a capital request, it would be for $200,000 because that is the total amount that we will need.
That's my number, sorry. Sorry for the.
It's, so $200,000 is a round number that we had RFPs for last year to upgrade the wireless across the district. We would be eligible for E-rate reimbursement, but to do that, you need the full amount in your budget. So we would have an operational budget of $200,000 to go towards that in total, but we'll only be paying $80,000 because it's a 60% reimbursement. So that's the way it works. So if we were going to the towns as a capital request, it would be for your percentage of the $200,000. So it's roughly 50-50, very close to, so about $100,000 per each town as a capital request.
But that would, just to clarify, that would cover the $80,000 that eventually the rebate, the residual of that 200 would go towards the network upgrade, the network server upgrades and other capital pieces that are
that's
in there.
associated with that project.
Yeah, so if you look at the technology, and this is a question that we had asked too, if you look at the technology budget, you wouldn't see a line item for 200K because the thought process is we would get the wireless upgrade, then the rebate would pay for the other capital pieces that are in there.
I see.
For that, so, but for the rebate to happen, we have to show there is a
A budget for the full amount.
Exactly.
Do you want to get into
And
the
that-
school choice? Oh, sorry, there's one.
No, so you budgeted the full 200,000,
We budgeted the rebate.
only the rebate?
There's there's a server upgrade in there as well, but that's not a part of the E-rate program. So it's two separate items. I think if we condense them down into one, it might be dirty the waters a little bit.
So I think that's one discussion that we have here. The other discussion is school choice, as Derek brought up in the past. The district has proposed a $400,000 offset for school choice. This is a topic area over the next few meetings. I personally believe that is too high. For the reason being is that number assumes that we will get an additional 15 students in school choice coming into the district. Although
15 new students.
15 new
Right.
students. We currently have 65 students currently in our school choice, and we have a residual from the prior year. I think we need to come in at a little bit lower number just so that we're covering with that. The good news with school choice is any residual amount we apply the following year. So for example, we have, I believe, 40K sitting in school choice right now. So that number is being applied to this year, plus they had proposed an additional 360 to come up with that 400,000. Where we only have 65 students, we're losing, I believe, 8 of them because they're seniors. So in order to get to that 400K, there's your 15 new students that we would need. In the past, we haven't hit that number, so it had to come elsewhere in the budget in that particular case. And I think we've been conservative in that approach to make sure that we are at least covered for this year and any residual will be applied for the following year.
And just to be sure, no one make no assumptions, so the numbers are significant because the state reimburses you for $5,000 per child. So that's, when he's using that math, that's the number. So even though obviously per pupil cost is higher for our students in the district, each school choice child that is designated, we receive $5,000 from the state.
And that's prorated. So if they come in
Yes.
December,
Yes.
we don't get the full
Correct.
for that case.
Correct.
Where did you come up with the number 15?
The number one.
15.
So right now we have 65 students,
So you just,
right?
Did a
So
quick math.
I did my 8th grade math and I basically said, hey, if I did 65 times the 5, which again, that assuming they're all here full year, I don't know that breakdown. That's my 325 plus the 40K.
Yep.
That's why I think the number should be 365.
Okay.
If we were to match that 400, we would have to have enough students to hit that 360 number. While taking in consideration, we're losing 8 students because they're graduating.
Yeah. And are you doing something to actively recruit these people, or is
So
this just?
school choice is part of the agenda where we need to, one, the way the process is, and correct me if I'm wrong, is we first approved to be a school choice district. I don't foresee any reason why we wouldn't continue that. I'm one of 8, so in that case. And then keeping in mind class size as a big opponent, we are, the superintendent would come back with recommendations for that as far as what grade levels to open that up to. We haven't in past years opened it up to the elementary school because of the class size issue, and I think that's something, I think the full school committee would be proponent to continue that process.
So to answer your question, though, the state does a pretty good job of really identifying those districts that are school choice and getting that information out. We use our website. And, I think probably the thing that would certainly attract more students and more families were if the committee vote, which is the annual vote, were to open it up to the elementary levels, right? I mean, that's where you would see many more school choice applications than we currently receive. The problem with that situation is then you create other service program
Yep.
issues in relation to class size and things, but
Yeah.
we are an attractive district for school choice, I will say, based on proximity. But we're also in much more competition, right? Freetown-Lakeville's been a school choice district for some time. Almost all the districts have chosen in some capacity.
Yeah, I'm just wondering how you're going to differentiate yourself and try to push that number to actually make it attainable.
Yeah, so.
Why would you have a student come in the middle of the year?
So I'll give you an example of that's more common than a new student coming in. It's a student who's living in the district and they move out. So that student wants to stay as a school, wants to stay in the school. So in the past, there would have just been an agreement and said, you can do that and transport. Now we designate them as school choice. So a student that now moves to New Bedford, rather than say you have to go to New Bedford, we accept them and change. So there's some mid-year designations. There are situations where we still have slots available, Rich, though, that, for example, more at the secondary level, right, middle school, high school, freshman has a challenge. And I'll give you an example. Maybe grade New Bedford vote, right, doesn't work out. They thought the vocational school was going to be the way, it didn't work out, and will apply. Those are the most common types of examples. Usually students are making that decision early on, right? They're family decisions they've chosen. So you don't see a ton of midstream. You really see a lot more reclassification, to Steve's point. Where we're saying in the past they weren't even doing that. We immediately say, honestly, how this came up is a lot of residency issues. Either town, if you hear people aren't living, one of the things we made clear was, if you're upfront and honest and we investigate, we're not throwing your children out. We're going to reclassify them, though, and you're going to have to provide transportation. That has helped us with residency issues. Mm-hmm. Parents were apt to not tell us that they moved or they have a new address because they thought they were going to lose their student status. We've had, the building principals will tell you, we've had at least parents coming in saying, you know, we just moved we just got a smaller place in Fall River, and we want, and we want to transport them, but we'd like them to stay in Aponequid. So that's.
But I mean, after the school year is over, they go to Fall River then, right?
No, once a student is identified as school choice, that is the risk that you run. They have the opportunity to remain school choice throughout their entire time frame.
But how do you, let's say we fill the 15 slots.
Yep.
There's none available.
Yep.
Then what happens?
So the flexibility for the state is that's completely on local discretion. So what will happen is next school committee meeting, there'll be a vote. They'll first vote to say they're going to be a school choice district. They then identify how many slots are available, Rich, to your point, right? So we identify that. You're not locked into that point. In fact, the language and legislation basically says the superintendent has the right after that point to accept or reject based on other circumstances. So even though you set the number's open. I'm real challenged. First of all, at the elementary level, I don't have a whole lot of flexibility there, but I'm a little bit more open. The part of the issue, I'm really talking off time, but I think it's important just to note, as much as it seems like a revenue gain, and why wouldn't you accept students mid-year and during the school year, a lot of the instances of children who want to come to you mid-year typically come with some issues that they're faced somewhere else. And so you have to be aware of that.
Well, what I get concerned about is that, you know, we're tight as it is,
Yep.
you know, especially, you know, I know you say you don't do the elementary schools now, but, you know, at the high school level, as an example, you have so many AP courses and so many students going to the AP courses, and I don't think it's fair to say, okay, now we're going to add this student, and that person wants to take an AP course or whatever it happens to be, and so I get a problem with that.
Yeah.
Because, you know, the class sizes are very small and very specialized, you know, for those particular areas. Not just the AP courses, it's other things.
Yeah.
And they're taking a slot of a student from Freetown-Lakeville, and I don't think that's right, but that's me.
I hear you loud, and I would agree. I mean, but I have not, it has not been brought to my attention that programs or services have been compromised for our kids. But I would agree with you. I was in a class today, AP calculus class. Actually, the teacher asked if I'd like to jump in as a guest lecturer, Mrs. Gray. I'll have a little conversation with her after that. But you know, because I said of all the classes, this would not have been the class I was going to do the guest lecture for. I was a biology teacher. I could do, but 17 kids in that class. Just to give, let me share that with anecdote for the number perspective. So we haven't. But you're absolutely right. Certainly those students, once we've identified them as school choice, have the right to attend the Freetown-Lakeville Regional School District. Right on through.
No, I understand that.
Yeah.
But I'm saying that somebody that has moved out of town,
Yeah.
And then all of a sudden, that person becomes an additional school choice, student. We've identified we're only going to allow 65 or whatever the number is. And then that student is staying there for 3, 4, whatever it happens to be.
Yeah.
Potentially not only taking spaces for AP courses, is taking a space on a sports team or whatever, so.
Oh, yeah, that's true. That is true.
So I have a concern. That's just my personal opinion, so.
The majority of the kids that are mid-year are just being reclassified, so they were already a student in here, correct?
The majority.
Yeah.
There are students that, yeah.
Okay.
But that does increase your population,
Yep.
Steve.
Correct.
It does.
We'll open up to any other questions.
I have a question. The school transportation that we have not gotten reimbursed for, that Ashley, how much is that?
It hasn't come out yet.
Do you have an estimate on that?
It's a lot.
It's a lot.
No, I don't see it being a lot. I don't see
You
it being
mean
very
the
much.
original transportation
Yeah.
question,
Yeah.
supplemental
The
money?
supplement.
For the 20 budget. The 20 budget.
It's FY19 supplemental. We have not received it.
Okay,
The state.
FY 19, right?
Yeah.
No, so the state hasn't come out with any allocations yet, so I can't speak to it.
Okay, what about the circuit breaker money? Have we received the anticipated circuit breaker money for fiscal 20 that we thought we were gonna get?
Yes.
So we have all of that.
Well, no, it comes out quarterly.
Well, I know that, but I mean, there's no additional funding for the circuit breaker money coming in fiscal 20.
Yes, there is. It's on your FY20 assessment sheet that was reported back in October.
The 20 sheet?
Yes, the 20 assessment sheet. So if you look at the assessment sheet and look at the circuit breaker line, we had projected about $750,000 when we did the budget last year, and we received $781,000. Yep. There will be FY19 supplemental funds coming from the state, but we don't know what that amount is gonna be to date.
Okay, so those are two potential revenue numbers that would be carried into fiscal 21,
Yes,
right?
right. The circuit breaker, so if you look at the revenue source on this FY20 assessment sheet, and that goes back to the school choice conversation, you'll see that we projected, we've received a little bit more funds for circuit breaker, around $32,000, but we did not meet our school choice amount, so that was a loss of revenue of $90,000. If you continue down the page a little bit, regional transportation did go up about $74,000, so you can see the amount of 15 at the bottom of the page. The transportation money will roll into E&D because we do not have a regional transportation revolving account set up.
Okay.
And that was also based on our conversation of prior regional FinCom meetings last year. We had talked about if the state had given additional revenues after we voted the budget, that was the great opportunity of that moving into E&D. So that's a conversation we've had for new members.
So in 20's budget, we missed the revenue projections for school choice.
Yes.
And we're projecting an increase for next year.
Okay.
I just have a quick question on the health insurance. I've noticed in prior years, the increase has been around 4 to 5%. Why is it so low for this year?
We're going out for an RFQ this year in hopes to bring down that rate and to have our health insurance provider kind of put us as knowing that they might lose us. So we've been working with a consultant, and we felt that this year was the right time to go out to bid to see what the market has.
But
It's still a projected number
Still a
this time,
projected
correct?
number.
So Maya had
Did
come
you
out-
base your projections on a recommendation by?
Yes.
Okay.
So Maya came out with a range. They have a negative, I think, 0.5% up to 7.8% is their range for this year. So we fell right in the middle. We are one of their clients that could potentially be leaving, so we went on the lower end of that range. They have an obligation to tell us by the end of February what our rate will be for FY21. So as we continue this budget cycle, I will update that number as I get it.
Yeah, the RFQ process, which helps with our negotiations limits us for the time frame perspective, because in the past, they've given us their rate, but because they're in a competitive situation right now, they've held on that for obvious reasons.
There's no rate until they, right.
Here's a couple more questions on the revenue for fiscal '21. The school transportation, why do you think the school transportation is $136,000 less than last year?
That's the amount the state gave us off the cherry sheet.
And I know that. And what's percentage of that, Ashley?
I'm sorry.
What percentage are we getting from the state?
Let me check. So I know that in years past, it has gone up as we've gone through the budget process or the state. The last 2 years, there have been significant bumps. I don't want to put that in the budget as a standard because the last 2 years, one was an election year, and the year prior to that was when Auditor Bump had put out her audit report about regional transportation, and there was an additional bump of monies. As we just talked about with health insurance, during this budget process, the state is going to release more money, or a budget, and I'll update that as we go through, so we'll have the most up-to-date information as we go through the process. It's 65%.
Okay. Like Old Colony is using 70%, as their best as for an estimate. And coincidentally, I was at an event last night, and the governor was there. And I had the opportunity to spend 10, 15 minutes with the governor to express my concern as to the funding of Chapter 70, number one. Number two, told him about the transportation, that we're getting less transportation than we did last year. And the circuit breaker money, they promised us more money for the circuit breaker money. They didn't do that. And I said, how come? And he was kind of surprised, and he took my name and number, and I'm sure he's not going to call me back, but one of his aides will call me back because I said, hey, we wind up getting $89,000, but in the end, $30 per student, and in the end, we're getting less than last year. I mean, that doesn't seem right. So I know there's a lot of communities expressing that, saying concern, especially regional school districts. So I would like to see us, that's just me, using at least a projection of 70%. Because everybody else is using 70% as a projection. That's me.
Ashley, can you talk about the whole circuit breaker, Steve, and we've had this conversation and how it's funded and how other districts have budgeted circuit breaker and how we do it here? Sure.
So circuit breaker is a reimbursement of special education out of district placements. It can range up to 75% reimbursement, but there have been many years that has not been met. So with the new Student Opportunity Act, circuit breaker will be reimbursed on out-of-district placements and also transportation. Transportation will only be reimbursed if they meet the placement tuition cost of 75%. Over the last 2 years, they come in about 65% as their initial projections, and we've received a little bit more funds as we go. There are many districts when they use circuit breaker funds, they are 18 months behind. So it's a revolving account, it's a special fund, and when you receive revenue, you have 18 months to spend it. So to have an accurate amount, we would take in funds, we would take an FY20's revenue and use it in FY21. Here, we project what we're going to receive, and we use that in the current year. So some years it's worked because we've received more than what we projected, but some years we've come under if the state doesn't meet 75%. And it also fluctuates year to year. So last year we received approximately, or for FY20, our reimbursements will be around $781,000. However, because tuitions change year over year, I'm only projecting $520,000 for next year because we don't have that as much in the placement for out-of-district tuition. So if we do it in arrears, if we have the 18 months, I can tell you exactly what we're going to use each year, and it's a little bit easier to budget. However, we've been able to make it work over the last 2 years I've been here.
Because we've used circuit breaker in the past to the point where we drained it down.
Exhausted it. So.
But what did you, in the budget, that he says here it's level funded, the dollar amount is level funded.
Yes.
based upon the costs, if they gave us the 75, whatever the salary number, 75%, what would it have been?
So I use 70% as my projection.
So 70% of 526,000?
That's the 70%
That's the
reimbursement.
70%.
So it would be 70% of a much higher amount because of the costs, right?
Yes.
This is what we're getting in revenue.
That would be the revenue, that'd be the 70% reimbursement.
That's what we're anticipating.
Right. Okay.
It'd be a much better budget practice had we had a fixed number that we knew about.
Every year.
Every
yeah.
year.
And that also goes for school choice as well. They have the same guidelines where you can use it 18 months after you receive the revenue. And there are many school districts that use that revenue for budgeting the next year.
I think that's up to where we want to go.
Absolutely.
Right, so I think that, so that we're being,
But I think the point is, these are the moving targets always, and the more the less of a moving target we create by eliminating things like this, the more predictable our budget will be, the better off we'll be having these initial discussions with the towns and the regional FinCom. Those are big numbers.
can we go back to the what's the difference between the 65% and the 70%?
Regional transportation.
Correct.
Transportation.
Did you say 55%, Esther? I thought you said,
65%.
that's what I thought you said, yeah.
$120,000
Difference.
difference. My recommendation as the finance director, I wouldn't go that high just solely because in the additional revenues, we only received $74,000 last year. I can go back and look for FY19, I don't have that at my fingertips, but if we wanted to change it.
So let's talk about the regional transportation supplement, because we haven't talked about that in the budget process right now. Do you have a number in there for that at all? No, right?
That's what we don't have.
Right, so, but we haven't talked about how the initial discussion was possibly applying that to lower the assessment, am I correct on that?
Yes.
Typically, that would close to E&D had we, gotten the money and there was an excess, correct?
So we can't do that right now because we do not have a regional transportation fund set up.
We can't do what, close it to E&D if we got the supplement?
We cannot use it on the assessment.
Right,
We have
right,
to close
okay.
it to
No, we'd have to
ED.
create the fund.
We have to close it, right.
That's
Okay, and
that-
initial
that-
discussion, we talked about using it in the assessment. Did we find out some after the fact, or?
No, she's saying the committee would have to take action to create the fund in order to do that.
Oh, in order for that to flow through and offset the assessment
Because we don't
this
have the
year,
fund that existed,
in
yes.
+21, right.
I think there's two
Which we
parts
could
of the
do.
conversation. We can set up the account, and there's no money that's being
Right.
put into it, right? But I think the secondary discussion is what are the funds that get put into that aspect of it, right? I think the concern in years past is what can those funds be used for, right? And that was the concern as far as when we didn't even have E&D,
Right.
For that. We're back up to a 1%
Yeah.
of our total budget in E&D, which is still not a healthy amount, but it is much better than where we were. So I think that's the secondary conversation, is what is the funding to that piece? And once we figure out what that number is for the supplemental budget, I think that makes it for a healthy conversation. But as I said at the beginning, I don't believe, once the state number's fully fleshed out, that we're gonna be $136,000 less than last year. Based on the past 2 years, is what's been going on. But that could also change,
But as I'll say on the 26th, it's critical that the committee consider establishing the regional transportation fund, or whatever amount we get, we will not have the option to roll it into any assessment, right? It'll go right into E&D.
Well, the reason why I raised the number, if we're talking 136,000, his number's
Capture it there.
120.
Yeah.
I mean, for the difference there, then you may just capture it with that.
Correct. Yeah, you get that 5% gap.
Right. Close that gap.
With a known number as opposed to projected.
Right.
Any other questions from anybody sitting at the table? It doesn't have to be just from the.
Yeah, I got a general comment. spent a lot of time, I guess, discussing what the options are and where we are, and spending a couple of months going through the budget, deciding what we're gonna cut and what we're not gonna cut. The bottom line, I'll speak for Lakeville, is that, based upon the assessment that's being proposed here, an increase of $939,000, and Freetown is, what?
7.6.
Seven, whatever. There's no way we can fund that. I mean, it is what it is. So I guess what I would like to see is that we should have at least a maintenance, what I call a maintenance budget, which includes maintaining all the staff and all the services, that we have, so we can look at that to see what staff has been added, because I'm certainly not gonna spend hours going through this thing here, looking to try to decide, where the staff is, how much the staff is, I don't know. But we have to try to get a basis, to try to see what the requirements are to fund what we got and keep what we got. So that's my opinion. And, the number that probably, from our standpoint, is that, roughly in the $500,000 range, would be a $500,000 range increase over last year from our assessment is probably something that's probably doable. But we have a lot of factors on our own that we're still, trying to work on and get, just like health insurance costs, even though looks like we got a health insurance number today. So, it's reasonable, it's 3.9%, which is the lowest it's been in years, and that's significant. I don't have to tell you, you got a $2 million health insurance costs in the town, and you only get a 3.9% increase versus a 10% increase, that throws everything out of whack. So, so there's that, but, so there's a lot of factors. We're still working, through our budget process, but I don't see us coming up with an additional $200,000 on top of that $500,000, to fund, the regional school district, budget. And it's just, and if anybody wants to see the numbers, I'll gladly give them to you. But I'm just trying to talk about reality here. So I don't want everybody school committee to go off and, think that, oh, yeah, this is great, we're gonna do this, we're gonna do this, and we're gonna do that, based on what? And I don't think, this is my first time in the regional school committee, so I'm regional finance committee, so I don't know what this process is, but I don't think it's really up to the regional finance committee to say, oh, we need to cut this and we need to cut that. I think that's up to the superintendent and the school committee to do that, not me, because I don't know, all the information that, that's in this budget, and I don't know, I mean, there's things that change and things that, you talked about the technology. I would like to see, what the capital is, the capital piece that's in that budget and what makes up that capital piece of the budget. Because that's certainly a factor. It sounds like it's 200,000, I think you said, Ashley, somewhere in that area. But I'm just telling you the reality. I mean, it is what it is.
So, I appreciate those comments because they kind of echo what we've said all along. I don't think it's ever been this, we've made a recommendation, or the role of this committee was to make a recommendation to the school committee, but it wasn't to go through and know every line item. It was just to get together with the towns and say, hey, what can we all do? What can we all afford? How can we work on this together to make a recommendation to the school committee as a whole number? I don't think it's this committee's job, I agree with you, to tell the superintendent how to run the school. That's what he gets paid to do.
Nor is it the full school committee.
Right. So,
That's right.
but it's our job to do what's reasonable and respectable and what we can all afford. So I think the whole point of this board was just to sit here and say, how do we all come together and make the numbers work? So what you're saying is good news to me in the sense that at least somebody at this point in time has put out a number.
Right.
We don't get this at this point in time, so at least somebody has said, here's my number.
I mean, I can't
So-
guarantee the number, but I feel.
No, but
It's in
it,
stone.
I put it
It's
in, yeah, I put it in there as my proposed
Put it in
budget,
there.
so.
I think we
but at this
put
point,
in
but like us, there's things that are still fluid and moving, so the point is to keep the dialogue open.
we're negotiating 3 contracts too, so.
Yeah.
So, this is the earliest I've heard of a number, and at least I'm happy about that.
Yeah,
I mean, I don't know how Freetown, I know Freetown's better financially than we are, but, so I have
You
no
got some
idea.
revenue coming in.
Today.
But to Rich's point, we did a maintenance budget
Yeah.
for most of our departments. We had a restructuring in one of our departments, but we did a maintenance budget. And we, figured out where it would take us with the steps and levels and contractual obligations and all our various expenses that we could possibly, confine at this time. And came up and to see really where we're at and what we can afford. And the number is a lot closer to 500 than it is 900.
Yeah. Well, the other thing, unfortunately, the town last year used some one-time revenue to balance the budget, and then it shouldn't have. So we've got to cut that back, right out of our revenue stream and try to make up, that difference. So, they used a significant amount of free cash, E&D, to balance the budget, and but frankly, they shouldn't have, and that's a problem. And there's other areas too. It is a moving target, and probably in 2 or 3 weeks, we can get you a better handle on it and where it is. But I don't want the expectations to be that we're working on the $900,000 assessment, because it isn't gonna happen.
Well, that's never been, right? So we get something from the superintendent, and I can speak from the time that at least Derek and I have been on this committee and the school committee, it's always well, where do we need to work with the town to figure out the best approach in that case? So this is their initial budget, we just got it. We need to go through it and figure out what we think is probably too much of an ask in that case. We don't go into the details as far as what he should be cutting, what he shouldn't be. It's more of a numbers game at that point. If Lakeville is saying, $500,000, right now, the saying combined is almost a $900,000 cut from the budget, right? That's a huge number. And I know there's several areas that can come from. But looking at that is actually going to dip below a maintenance budget for the schools.
Right.
Right.
So just as you or the towns are preparing us for that, I think the towns also need to hear the message that if those are the numbers, that's going to dip below a maintenance budget in that case. But we are still, I'll say, day 3 in this process. We're giving you all the information in this process. The state still is going to be a moving target. And Ashley, in recent years, while we've been transparent and updating this to the latest numbers from the state. And I think it's great that you had a conversation with the governor, because that's where we're getting not the best support from is the state, and we ended up falling down to the local district. So, and obviously we don't know what Freetown's number, but if you do your number and the percentage of Freetown, it's going to dip below a maintenance budget for the schools in that case. That's right.
How do we know that? We haven't seen anything to show the maintenance budget.
I can assure you.
If you're saying that if the number right now is 939, you're saying it's 500,000. I know this is not etched in stone. That's 450. Let's call it a round number, 450,000 from Lakeville. You take the percentage from Freetown, which is probably going to be about $400,000 if you do the allocation. You're right. That's almost a $900,000 cut out of the budget, right? Out of an increase when if you just look at salaries alone,
Right.
is.
How many new staff members are in there?
What's that? I'm sorry.
How many new employees, staff members are in the budget totally?
Agreed, there are new staff numbers in there, and that's some of the questions we have.
Well, how many are there?
It's in the
5.
PowerPoint.
It's in your it's in the
It's
initial
in the
PowerPoint.
PowerPoint.
There's 4 or 5.
But if the overall increase is 1.4, and our increase of salaries alone is 900, right? That right there tells you it's gonna dip below a maintenance budget.
Right.
A lot of work still ahead.
Yep.
I think it's great that we put a number out there, and that's what we have to figure out and work as far as what can we do. And I think some of the discussions that move forward with that.
I think the key here, Rich, is that we have had this budget for less than 1 week. We have not, as a group, talked at all. You and I talked about the fact last night that, we're dissecting it right now. So there are additional staffing positions in there. That's not to say that they're going to stay.
No,
But the simple math.
I'm not gonna say, who's gonna stay and who's going.
Right.
I'm not going to say that either.
To do that.
The simple math shows that the maintenance budget based on that cut is not even, that's just,
We don't get the
it's way below our
maintenance
maintenance
budget,
budget. The simple math tells you that just look at your steps and levels and your
Yeah.
contractual obligations. You won't have a maintenance budget.
I also want to say that I spoke to the governor too. I didn't do quite as good a job as Rich did, but he heard it twice last night, so.
Well, I think that's where the conversation, and I know we've had the conversation with, we
Yeah.
have the chair of the Ways and Means in our own backyard, so that's been a conversation that we've
And the
had.
senator's aware too, and their whole point was that the big budget push this year for schools is more towards the bigger urban districts.
It always has been.
It's worse than ever.
I know.
Hanging out with
I'm
the
sure you
wrong
know.
people.
So we're
Hanging out
getting
with the
kind of short
government.
shrift on
Don't
this.
say that to
Yeah, I
Mrs.
was
Madeira's
hopeful because I
cousin.
looked at Old Colonies and they had an even
Old
level
Colony.
increase. I'm like, someone
Old
got.
Colony got
wrong.
$14,000. That's it, totally, for their budget. Transportation increase and their Chapter 70 money, 14,000. What are you gonna do with that?
What's that, what's that
But they also
tuition?
get
Yeah, what's that
approximately $18,000.
Tuition, right, that's
Okay.
tuition.
Right, so they do get a much larger,
They get a lot of grants.
they get a lot of, a much higher per student from the towns as far as that too. So, wow,
I don't think it's as great as you think it is.
it is a lot greater than what this district gets.
Okay,
So,
I'm not gonna debate that, but okay.
Yeah, I don't remember.
The one thing I would say from my own personal perspective, because of where we were in E&D,
Mhm.
I don't see E&D being a solution to close this gap.
No, I agree.
I think
No.
that needs to come right off the table, and it can't be. We've gone down that road. We're at a still
doing
very
that.
susceptible level. I think anybody could agree, $600,000 in a $40 million budget. It's not a big, healthy E&D number. So in the past years, when we would, had gaps of talking of that, we did do some offsets with E&D. I couldn't even consider that.
No, I agree, and I think that's where, if there are areas in the budget that we can look at from a cutting, different funding mechanism, what have you, that's where we look at recommendations of this board, which is representative of the towns. And then there's a full number that is recommended. And I can tell you, in the last 3-4 years, the number that this body has recommended hasn't been the number that has been presented by the district. So it's a lower number in that particular case. So I'm confident that we would dissect the budget, concentrate on areas that we need to focus on, make some adjustments that are needed with the input from the administration as far as that.
I think we all have to understand that when we talk maintenance budget, I don't know how you refer to in the towns. We've always looked at it in the sense as operating as we operate today or last year, let's say. It's still not the optimal way to run the school.
No.
That's from my perspective, sitting on the school committee, I'm not asking that, but it's still not and I'm sure it's not the optimal way to run the town. But I think that needs to be recognized that, hey, we're getting a maintenance budget, but those maintenance budgets have still not achieved what we need to achieve as a school district. Still come short.
You're welcome to ask for an override if you want. You're welcome.
Rich, do you think do you see the towns having any appetite to consider though, if capital is built into this operational as in technology, is there room for discussion regarding one-time funds that either town would support in what would be considered a viable capital project? Obviously, it's an assessment, but it's separate. It's a separate article, and we have
Depends
not
upon what
proposed
it
any of
is and
those
how much it is, but
Okay.
you have until March 9th to submit the article.
to do that.
Okay.
That's it. That's the annual town meeting, March 9th. It has to be on the annual town meeting. It does not be on a special town meeting, which we will have a special, but.
Yep. I'm gonna accept that answer as a yes answer. He gave me the timeline. He didn't say he supported the project, which is
I
that
don't
it
want you to be
needs there.
surprised if you come to us on March 10th and say, can you put
Yeah.
this on the annual town meeting?
Yeah.
You know, I mean, it is what it is.
This is
you
the
know?
timeline. Yep, understood.
And I think you already got notification on.
Oh, no, it's in my, I have it, it's in
Yeah.
my calendar.
Yeah, we do. We do. We'll have that discussion.
Any other questions as of yet? I know there's going to be much further discussions as we go through along this process, but any questions? I know, I think I know the answer for both Rick and Ashley. Obviously, if there's any questions from anybody, both of them are very much approachable and be able to answer your questions. It doesn't have to wait until this meeting or anybody else. Is your contact information in here for Lisa Darren? Okay.
We can make sure.
Yeah, make sure that he gets you that.
The other piece, and I open it up to both towns, we just started the budget process. We're a roadshow, we'll go anywhere and anywhere to have a conversation. in relation. Although I will say, I think the years that I have done this, my 6th year here, there have been occasions where I think the effectiveness of this group has alleviated the need to do that. It was almost as if we were going at it without the support of the towns and kind of looking at groups. But if there were organizations in either town that wanted Ashley or I to come to give a presentation on the school budget, especially as we get a little bit further on down the line, we certainly let us know, including the boards and finance committees. I know we usually schedule something, but we certainly can do that.
Again, just to reiterate what I said earlier, the full school committee process is the next 2 meetings. We will be talking about or dissecting each of the next meeting on the 26th is focusing on the 5 schools. All the principals will be there, and then the following meeting would be all the other subsections that happen in there.
Both of those meetings are prior to that, the date that was just referenced.
So there'll be a lot of changes between now and then as far as what needs to happen and what doesn't need to happen. And we will keep everybody up to date as far as that. In the original calendar, our next meeting was going to be March 19th. I know, Rich, you had mentioned in the past that Thursdays don't work for you.
Well, I mean, you already set the date to do with the finance committee and the selectmen. I mean, I'd prefer not to, but I don't want to change it.
Yep. I'm sorry, the 19th is a Wednesday. Sorry, so it's not even a Thursday in that case. But my question is, do we want to schedule
The
another time?
19th is a Thursday.
The 19th
That's
is
a
a Thursday.
Thursday.
Thanks for moving to a Wednesday.
Did I have that one dated?
Are you in the wrong year?
I've done that.
It's easy to do when you're talking budgets.
Hate when they change the calendar.
19th is a Thursday.
19th is a
18th,
Thursday.
we can do 18th.
We can move that date. We can keep it as is, or I know we talked about potentially adding another meeting date just to get updated as far as what the full school committee does. I'm open to any or all as far as what people would like to do.
Steve, we have school committee meetings on February 26th and 2 in March.
So March 11th and March 25th. Can I propose a March 4th meeting date?
No.
No, we already got budget review meetings that night.
Okay, is that whole week?
We have it
Yeah.
on the 2nd, the 4th, and the 5th.
Yeah, that's pretty booked.
Don't you dare put a Friday night meeting.
At 4:30.
Yeah.
Okay, then we can keep it as that same meeting date, but I will take the step that after our next school committee, I will send an update sort of to this body as far as what happened in that case, just so that everyone is informed of that.
So we're talking about the 19th,
We're talking about the 19th.
which is a joint meeting between all the boards, right?
We have typically had that meeting, whether that has been attended by everybody,
It is not.
We used to actually do it on a Saturday and got very little attendance from the towns. So that's why we moved it to during the week, and we still do not get beyond this body. We will still invite the full finance committees, what have you, but we'll still proceed whether their full committee attends or not
This is for the 19th.
for the 19th. Yeah.
I guess I wish it would be done earlier because we're gonna make a decision on April 1st. We're not, the last few years in our town, I mean, it's been last minute. And, you know, we don't get the information to the taxpayers about what's going on, what people are voting on, and people are complaining about that. We're not gonna do it anymore. We're gonna provide the information on a timely basis to them. So when they go to town meeting, they have at least 2 weeks prior, you know, to town meeting. So we're not gonna be waiting until, what is it, April 8th, you're gonna approve the budget, somewhere in there?
April 8th is our
Yeah.
public meeting.
Right.
That's typically when we already have, which would be the March 25th date is our school committee meeting.
Okay.
So that's
I
typically,
just want you to know the time frame. We're done with waiting until the last minute, you know, at least from my perspective from the board, and the board's talked about it. And it's ridiculous, it's out of control.
I don't-
We're gonna
I
stop
don't-
it.
I don't think you get in any argument from that. I think the moving target is coming from the state, right? The state usually doesn't come out with their final numbers until right around the beginning of June
Yeah.
timeframe.
We're not gonna wait for the Senate. The budget didn't get approved until the end of July this year. It's a waste of
True.
people's time.
That is
There's
true.
no sense, we use the House budget, as the basis, going forward. And if you happen to have some information about the Senate's budget, which comes out usually the week before Memorial Day, but we're not waiting until that process, that's ridiculous. I mean, they didn't approve it until July, so nobody knew what was going on. You gotta go with what you got.
Yeah.
That's what we're gonna do. So we already know what our numbers are. We're not gonna change our numbers. We're getting 61,000 overall, 61, I think. So, on a $30 million budget, 61,000.
Any other questions or comments before we adjourn?
So my point again, Steve, was, do we want to wait till the 19th?
I put it out there for different dates, and, I proposed a date. If we want to propose a different date, I'm fine. I proposed the 4th, and you would come back saying that week doesn't work. So if there's a different date you'd like to use, we're open for discussion on that.
Well, the following week.
So we have a full school committee on March the 8th, on March 11th.
11, yeah.
Can we do this
can't
before the
Thursday,
school
we can do
committee?
March 10th.
Why not?
Can we do this before the
Why
school
not do it
committee?
right before the regular meeting?
We meet at 6:30, we say 5 o'clock, is that,
No, it's not fair to people who work.
That's my point,
It's
right.
not fair. I'm retired, it doesn't
Yeah.
make a difference to me, but,
so
it's not fair to him.
What day is that? Sorry.
March 11th is a Wednesday.
I could actually make that work.
Okay.
But
So
if-
5 o'clock on March 11th?
I should be able to make that work, yep.
Depends on
I'd
the
rather make my
24th.
night just miserable all the way.
I'm just trying to be respectful of what it said to the others that may have to commute
Why
down.
make 2 nights?
45 minutes or.
So we will meet next March 11th at 5 o'clock,
Okay.
okay?
And-
It probably be in this room, because we'll be setting up for the full school committee out in the main library, but we'll be,
Okay.
Are we at this?
And what do we-
In our
Oh,
private school?
hold that thought, I will get you the location before then, because March 11th, we are going to be,
At the middle school,
Grades.
no, where are we?
No, we're at a
Grades?
different school.
Different
We'll get
building.
the information.
Right.
we'll get the
Grace.
information out as soon as possible, that it's just that we are moving locations from a school committee perspective, so.
So, what are we gonna get at that meeting?
At the March 11th meeting, you'll have an update as far as, one, any other updates we get from the state, if anything comes out from that, but any update as far as what happens at our
26.
February 26th meeting, as well as that's it.
So, but you said the second meeting was gonna review
I
something.
thought it's actually 2 days after that deadline.
There's no reason to meet then until after, so we might as well just leave it the 19th then. If the school.
That's why I wanted the 4th, because it was before the 9th, but we can't do that. But we're meeting on the 26th.
I'm sorry, I was confused, Steve, because you had 2 sections of the budget, 2 different nights, right?
Yes.
And what were those dates?
That was 2/26 and March
5th.
11th.
Okay,
Oh, the 11th? Oh,
so
darn.
it's that night,
Yep.
So we would be
So-
meeting before.
right, so that's not gonna do us any good then, is it?
Well, the meat of it is going to be discussed on the 26th. If we need to talk about a separate warrant article from a technology perspective, that'll be something that we may raise on the 26th to meet that deadline.
No, but I'm more worried about the budget than I'm worried about the technology thing.
Well, I think,
You said
Rich.
that would be on the 26th, the majority of the.
Well,
So
the
the majority of the
buildings.
budget is going to fall into the 5 schools,
Right.
which is what we're meeting on the February 26th.
Okay, but you're not gonna finish the review with the school committee until the night of the 11th.
The night of the 11th, that is
So
correct.
why would we meet 5 o'clock before that? If we don't have that information.
You're the one that wanted to
No,
meet
I don't wanna
early.
change it, I'm just trying to make suggestions, I want
Yeah.
all the information, so we can at least, look at it, if the school committee's
So
not
if
done.
if we meet on the 19th, we will have update on 2 meetings of full review of the budget for that, with a potential prior vote of the school committee on the second meeting in March, I think is the 25th. if we stay on the 19th. If we want to meet earlier, you would get an update on half of the budget,
Then
which
we
is the
don't
high
want
school.
that. We don't want that.
Then we'll stick to the 19th.
I don't want that, you know.
Then we'll stick to the 19th. And that 19th would be 6:30 here in the library.
I'm gonna end up at Gray's anyway.
I always go to the wrong building.
I just think you have to make sure the 26th is
Yeah.
productive.
Agreed, but we want to have to know. Any other questions, comments? All right. 7:35, we'll entertain a motion to adjourn.
So move.
Second,
A second.
all in favor? All right. Thank you, have a good night.
We just canceled.